Not About Nightingales by Tennessee Williams. This play is dedicated to the memory of Clarence Darrow, the great defender, whose mental frontiers were the four corners of the sky. Opening. The action takes place in a large American prison during the summer of 1938. The conditions which the play presents are those of no particular prison, but a composite picture of many. Loudspeaker. Yeah, this is the Lorelei excursion steamer. All-day trip around Sandy Point. Leave 8 a.m., return at midnight. Sightseeing, dancing, entertainment with Lorelei Lou and her 8 Lorelites. Got your ticket, lady? Got your ticket? Okay, that's all. We're shoving off now. Now we're leaving the boat dock, folks. We're out in the harbor. Magnificent skyline of the city against the early morning sunlight. It's still a little misty around the tops of the big towers downtown. Hear those bells ringing? That's St. Patrick's Cathedral. Finest chimes in America. It's 8 o'clock sharp. Sun's bright as $1. Swell day. Bright, warm. Makes you mighty proud to be alive. Yes, ma'am. There it is. You can see it now, folks. That's the island. Sort of misty still. See them big stone walls? Dynamite-proof. Escape-proof. 3,500 men in there, folks, and lots of them will never get out. Boy, oh boy, I wonder how it feels to be locked up in a place like Doomsday. Oh, there goes the band, folks. Dancing on the upper deck. Dancing, folks. Lorelei Lou and her 8 Lorelites. Dancing on the upper deck. Dancing. Dancing, dancing. Fade. Flash forward to end of play. Light fades except for a spot on Eva clutching Jim's shoes. Loudspeaker. Oh, there it is. You can see it now, folks. That's the island. Sort of misty tonight. You'd see it better if there was a moon. Those walls are dynamite-proof, escape-proof. 3,500 men in there. Some won't get out till doomsday. There's the band. Dancing on the upper deck, folks. Lorelei Lou and her 8 Lorelites. Dancing, dancing, dancing. Fade. Music comes up. The shoes fall from Eva's hands and she covers her face. Blackout. Act 1. Episode 1. Announcer. Miss Crane applies for a job. Spot lights the bench outside the warden's office where Mrs. Bristol is sitting. Mrs. B is a worn matron in black, holding a napkin-covered basket on her lap. Eva enters the spot from the right and sits on the bench nervously. She grips her pocketbook tensely and stares straight ahead. Mrs. B. Your hat. Eva. My hat? Mrs. B. Yes, look. Eva. Oh dear. Mrs. B. Here. Eva. Thanks. Mrs. Bristol removes a spot from Eva's hat with tissue paper from her basket. Mrs. B. It's those pigeons, the little rascals. Eva. Yes, they're much too casual about such things. Mrs. B. It's such a nice hat, too. Eva. Oh, it's quite old. She puts the hat back on and drops her purse. Mrs. B. You're nervous. Eva. So nervous I could scream. Mrs. B. Is it your husband? Eva. Who? Mrs. B. That you're coming to see about. Eva. Oh, no. No, I'm coming to see about a job. Mrs. B. A job? Here? Eva. Yes, here. I've heard there's a vacancy. Mrs. B. But wouldn't you find it awfully depressing? An awfully depressing sort of place to work in? Eva. I don't think so. It's not an ordinary prison. Mrs. B. Isn't it? Eva. No, it's supposed to be a model institution. Mrs. B. A model institution? Eva. Yes, everything's done scientifically, they say. They've got experts in psychology and sociology and things like that, you know. Mrs. B. Well, Eva. The old idea used to be punishment of crime, but nowadays it's social rehabilitation. Mrs. B. Now just imagine. How did you come to know? Eva. I read all about it in the Sunday supplement. Jim passes across the spot. Eva, jumping up. May I see the warden? Jim. Sorry, he's not back yet. He crosses into the door of the office. Eva. Oh. Mrs. B. I've got a son in here. He used to be a sailor. Jack's his name. Eva. A sailor? Mrs. B. Yes, he was one of Uncle Sam's Navy boys, till he got in trouble with some kind of woman. Eva. What a shame. Mrs. B. Yes, wasn't it though? The common slut. Excuse me, but that's what she was. My Scott. She clutches her bosom. Eva. What? Mrs. B. I've got the most awful palpitations. Eva, jumping up. You're sick? Let me get you some water. Mrs. B. No, thanks, dear. I'll just take one of my phenobarbital tablets, and I'll be all right in a jiffy. Stage business. I've been under such a strain lately with Jack on my mind all the time. Eva. You shouldn't be worried. My landlady's brother-in-law is one of the guards. It was through him that I heard about this vacancy, and he says they have less serious trouble here than any penitentiary in the country. Mr. Whalen, the warden, is very, very highly respected. Mrs. B. Well, I do hope you're right for Jack's sake, but I haven't got much comfort out of his letters, especially the last one. It was that one which so... It wasn't at all like those long, marvelous letters that he used to write me when he was at sea. It was scribbled in such a bad hand, and, well, it sounded sort of feverish to me. What is Klondike? Eva, Klondike? Part of Alaska. Mrs. B. That's what I thought. But in Jack's letter he said he'd been sent down here and it was as hot as... Well, I won't say it. Eva. Possibly it's one of those colonization schemes. Mrs. B. No, I don't think so. In fact, I'm positive it isn't. He said they wouldn't let him write me about it if they knew. So he was sneaking the letter out by one of the boys. Eva. How long does he have to stay here? Mrs. B. 5 years. Eva. Well, that's not so long. Mrs. B. It seems like forever to me. Eva. He'll probably come out a better and stronger boy than before he went in. Mrs. B. Oh no, they couldn't make a better and stronger boy than Jack was. I don't understand all about it, but I know one thing. Whatever happened, it wasn't my boy's fault. And that's what I'm going to say to the warden soon as I get in to see him. I've been waiting here 2 days. He never has time. Eva, rising. I can't stand waiting. It makes me too nervous. I'm going right in and make that young fellow tell me when Mr. Whalen will be here. Mrs. B. Yes, do. Tell him how long I've been waiting, and ask him if Jack... Eva has already entered the office. Mrs. B. sinks slowly down, clutching her bosom. Oh, dear. Spot moves from the bench to the interior of the office. Eva at the door. I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon. Jim, giving her a long look. For what? Eva, for intruding like this. But I couldn't sit still any longer. When can I see Mr. Whalen? Jim, what about? Eva, a job? Jim is filing papers in a cabinet. He continues all the while. Jim, he's out right now, inspecting the grounds. Eva, oh, will it take him long? Jim, that depends on how much grounds he feels like inspecting. Eva, Oh, Jim. Sometimes inspecting the grounds doesn't mean inspecting the grounds. He gives her a brief smile. Eva. Doesn't it? Jim. No. He crumples a paper. Sometimes it's an idiomatic expression for having a couple of beers in the back room at Tony's, which is sort of an unofficial clubhouse for the prison staff. Would you like to sit down? Eva. About how long do you suppose I'd have to wait? Jim. It's a hot afternoon. He might do a lot of ground inspection, and then again he might not. His actions are pretty unpredictable. That's a good word. Eva. What? Jim. Unpredictable. Anything with 5 syllables is a good word. Eva. You like long words? Jim. They're my stock in trade. I'm supposed to use a lot of them to impress you with my erudition. There's another one right there. Eva. Erudition? Jim. Yes, only 4, but it's unusual. I get 'em all out of this big book. Eva. Dictionary? Jim. Webster's, unabridged. He slams the file cabinet shut and leans against it. You see, I'm one of the exhibition pieces. Eva. Are you really? Jim. I'm supposed to tell you that when I came in here I was just an ordinary grifter. But look at me now. I'm reading Spengler's Decline of the West, and I'm editor of the Prison Monthly. Ask me what is an Archaeopteryx. Eva, what is it? Jim, it's an extinct species of reptile bird. Here's our latest issue. Eva, more and more confused. Of what? Jim, the Archaeopteryx, our monthly publication. Eva, why do you call it that? Jim, it sounds impressive. Do you know what an amaranth is? Eva, no. What is it? Jim, a flower that never dies. He lifts the book. I came across it in here. One of the classical poets compares it to love. What's your opinion of that? Eva, well, what's yours? Jim, I wouldn't know. I started my present career at the age of 16. Eva, that early? Jim, yes, the usual case of bad influences. And at that age, of course, love is something you dream about and blush when you look at yourself in the mirror next morning. He laughs. Eva looks away in slight confusion. Say, do you know that song? Eva, what song? Jim, giving a sour imitation. Ah, 'tis love and love alone the world is seeking. The guy sang it in chapel last night. Is that on the level? Eva, well, not exactly. Jim, you're inclined to admit a few qualifications? Eva, yes. For instance, what I'm seeking is a job and a new pair of stockings. Jim, those look good to me. Eva, they're worn to shreds. Jim, well, perhaps I'm prejudiced. Eva clears her throat. Jim clears his. Eva, picking up the newspaper. Prison, the door to opportunity. Jim, yes, that's one of my best editorials. It's been reproduced all over the country. I got 10 years of copper for writing that. Eva, copper? Jim, not what they make pennies out of. In here, copper means good time. Time off your sentence for good behavior. I've got about 10 years of copper stashed away in the files, and most of it's for extolling the inspirational quality of prison life. Mrs. Bristol enters timidly, clutching her basket. Jim, hello. Mrs. B, how do you do? Is Mr. Whalen in yet? Jim, no, he's still out inspecting the grounds. Mrs. B, oh, I do so want to see him this afternoon. I'm Jack Bristol's mother. Jim, Sailor Jack? Mrs. B, advancing a few steps. Yes. You know him? Jim, slightly. Mrs. B, struggling to speak. How's my boy? Jim. Sorry, I'm not allowed to give out information. Mrs. B. Oh, Jim. You better talk to Mr. Whalen tomorrow morning. Mrs. B. What time, please? Jim. 10 o'clock. Mrs. B. 10 o'clock. Could you give him these now? She places the basket carefully on the table. I'm afraid they'll get stale if they're kept any longer. They're for my boy. She turns slowly and goes out. Eva. Couldn't you tell her something to relieve her mind? Jim. Not about Sailor Jack. Eva. Why not? Jim. He's gone stirbugs. Eva. You mean... Jim, touching his forehead. Cracked up here. It's sort of an occupational disease among convicts. Eva. But they said in the Sunday supplement. Jim. I know. They interviewed me and the warden. Eva. You didn't tell them the truth? Jim. What is it that Plato said about truth? Truth is... Funny, I can't remember. Was it the Sunday supplement that gave you the idea of getting a job in here? Eva. That and my landlady. Her brother-in-law is Mr. McBurney, one of the prison guards. Jim. Mac's a pretty good screw. Eva. What? Jim. That means the garden here. He's one of our sample menus. Here's one of our sample menus. It shows what a comic gets to eat every day. It shows what a Connie gets to eat every day. You can see that it compares quite favorably with the bill of fare at any well-known boarding school. Everything's done scientifically here. We have an expert dietitian. Weighs everything by calories. Units of body heat. Hello, Mr. Whalen. Whalen enters. He is a powerful man, rather stout, but with coarse good looks. Warden. Hello there. He removes his coat and tosses it to Jim. Breezy day. Hot breezy day. He winks at Jim, then belches. Too much ground inspection. He loosens his collar and tie. Excuse me, lady, I'm going to do a striptease. Yep, it's a mighty wind. Feels like it comes out of an oven. Reminds me of those, he wipes his forehead, those beautiful golden brown biscuits my mother used to bake. What's this? He removes the cover from the basket. Speak of biscuits, and what turns up but a nice batch of homemade cookies? Have one, young lady. Jimmy boy? Jim takes two. You've got an awful big paw, Jimmy. He laughs. Show the new Archie What's-It to Miss Daily News, or is it the Morning Star? Have a chair. I'll be right with you. He vanishes for a moment into the inner room. Sweat's all I do these hot, breezy days. Jim, subtle voice. He thinks you're a newspaper woman. Warden, emerging. Turn on that fan. Well, now, let's see. Eva, to begin with, I'm not... Warden, you probably come here to question me about that ex-convict story in that damned yellow sheet down there in Wilkes County. That stuff about getting pellagra in here. Jimmy, hand me that sample menu. Jim, she's not a reporter. Warden, oh, what is your business, young lady? Eva, in breathless haste. I understand that there's a vacancy here. Mr. McBurney, my landlady's brother-in-law, told her that you were needing a new stenographer, and I'm sure that I can qualify for the position. I'm a college graduate, Mr. Whalen. I've had 3 years of business experience. References with me, but I've had such abominable luck these last 6 months. The last place I worked, the business recession set in. They had to cut down on their sales force. They gave me a wonderful letter. I've got it with me. She opens her purse and spills its contents on the floor. Oh, goodness, I've broken my glasses. Warden, coldly. Yeah? Eva, rising slowly. Could you give me a job, please? I'm terribly nervous. If I don't get a job soon, I'll... Warden, what? Go off the deep end? Eva. Yes, something like that. She smiles desperately. Warden. Well, Miss, Eva eagerly. Crane. Eva Crane. Warden. They call that window the quick way out. It's the only one in the house without bars. I don't need bars. It's right over the bay. So if it's suicide you got in mind, that window is at your disposal. No, Miss Crane, next time you apply for a job, don't pull a sob story. What your business executive is interested in is your potential value, not your personal misfortunes. He takes a cigar. Eva, turning away. I see. Warden, hold on a minute. Eva, yes? Warden, biting and spitting out the end of the cigar. There's just one prerequisite for a job in this office. Jimmy will explain that to you. Eva, turning to Jim. Yes? Jim, the ability to keep your mouth shut except when you're given specific instructions to speak. Warden, think you could do that? Eva, yes? Jim, the motorboat leaves the dock at 7:45 in the morning. Eva, thanks. Yes, thanks. She turns quickly and goes out, blind with joy. Warden, what do you think of her, Jimmy boy? Okay, huh? Jim, yes, sir. Warden, yes, sirree. Dizzy as hell, but she's got a shape on her that would knock the bricks out of the federal pen. He erupts in sudden booming laughter. Dim out. Episode 2. Announcer. Sailor Jack. Musical theme up. Après des mains blondes. Fade. There's a spot on his cell. Electric lights from the corridor throw the shadow of bars across the floor. The cell is empty except for the figure of Sailor Jack, slumped on a stool with a shadow of bars run across him. His face has the vacant look of the schizophrenic, and he is mumbling inaudibly to himself. His voice rises. Sailor Jack. Where? Port said. Not one of them but would have done it themselves if they'd have half a chance. He begins to sing hoarsely. Après de mes blondes, il fait bon, fait bon, fait bon. Après de mes blondes, qu'il fait bon de moi. No chance for advancement, huh? What would you say if I told you that I was admiral of the whole bitchin' navy? He laughs. Je donnerai Paris et Saint-Denis at St. Denis. Sounds are heard. A shrill whistle in hall and the shuffle of feet. The door of the cell clings open and Joe, Butch, and the Queen enter. Schultz. Lights out in 5 minutes. Butch. You fruit, go toot your goddamn horn out of here. Must think they run in a stick and sweatshop, this working overtime stuff. Get your task done or come back after supper. Goddamn machine got stuck. Deliberate sabotage, he calls it. I'd like to sabotage his guts. The Queen. What happened to you this morning? Queen in a high tenor voice. I got an awful pain in the back of my neck and flipped out. When I come to, I was in the hospital. They was sticking a needle in my arm. Say, what does +4 mean? Joe. Christ, it means, Butch, pocket your marbles. Queen. No. Is it bad? Joe. We're in swell cessity, Butch. A lunatic in a case of the Sif. Queen. The Sif? A whistle is heard. The lights dim in the corridor. Queen. Nah. He tries to laugh. I don't mean that. Sailor. Après de mes blonds, il fait bon, fait bon, fait bon. Après de mes blonds. Schultz. Cut the cackle in there. It's after lights. Butch. God damn it, can't you see he's blown his top? Joe. Yeah, get him out of here. Schultz. He's putting on an act. Sailor. Je donnerai Versailles. Paris et St. Denis. Schultz, you take another trip to Klondike, sailor. It won't be on a round-trip ticket. Butch, it's Klondike that's got him like this. He's been raving ever since you brung him upstairs. You must have cooked the brains out of him down there, Schultz. Sailor, La Tour d'Eiffel est sui. Schultz, rapping the bars. Dummy up, the lot of you. One more squawk and I'll call the strong arm squad. Queen, Mr. Schultz? Schultz, yeah. Queen, what does +4 mean? Schultz laughs and moves off. Butch, if I wasn't scared of losing all my copper, I'd reach through and grab that bastard. I'd rattle them peapod brains of his and roll them out on the floor like a pair of dice. The trouble is, in here you gotta pick your man. If I rubbed out a screw, I'd never get a chance at the boss. What time is it? Joe, 10:30. Butch, Matt comes on duty now. Joe, you think he'll take the sailor out? Butch, I'll tell him to. Queen, no, it's nothing that serious, or they would have kept me in the hospital. It's just indigestion. That's what I told him. I said the food is no good. It don't set good on my stomach. Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. I said I'm sick of spaghetti. Sailor. Après de mes blondes, il fait bon, il fait bon, fait bon. Après de mes blondes, qu'il fait bon dormir, dormir. Butch clips him with a fist. Joe, what'd you do that for? Butch, you want to tangle with the strong-arm squadron on account of him? A whistle is heard. Doors clang. They're changing now. He goes to the bars. Who's at McBurney? Mac, what do you want, Butch? Butch, for Christ's sakes, get this kid out of here. Mac, which kid? Butch, Sailor Jack. He's been stir-bugged since they brung him upstairs a week ago Tuesday. Mac, at the door. What's he doing? Butch, he's out right now. I had to conk him one. Butch, what did they tell you about roughing up the boys? Butch, roughing? Me? Listen. Ask Joe. Ask anybody. Ask the canary. The kid had blown his top. Schultz was going to call the strong-arm squad and have us all thrown in Klondike because he wouldn't quit singing them dirty French songs. Ain't that right, Joe? Joe. Sure, Mac. Whistle. Mac. Where's the stuff? Butch. Here. I got it tied up nice. Mac. Well, it's no put-in of mine. He should have done his task in the shop. Butch. He done his task pretty good. Joe. That boy worked hard. Mac. Not hard enough to suit the boss. Enter guards. All right, get him out of here. Put him in isolation tonight and have him looked after tomorrow. Queen. Mr. McBurney, what does +4 mean? Mr. McBurney? Mac goes out with guards carrying Sailor. Bird calls are heard in the hall. Voice in hall. Good night, Mac. Mac. Good night, Jim. Butch. Who's that, Allison? Joe. Yeah, it's the canary. Sailor from down the hall. Après de mes blanc, et fait bon, fait bon, fait bon. The sound fades. Butch. Hey, canary. Allison. The spot shifts to include Allison's cell. Jim. What do you want, Butch? He is shown removing his shirt and shoes. Butch. Next time you're in a huddle with the boss, tell him the angels in Hall C have put another black mark on his name for Sailor Jack. Jim. I'll tell him that. Butch. Tell him someday we're going to appoint a special committee of one to come down here and settle up the score. You hear me, Stool? Jim. I hear you. Butch. Just think. I used to be cellmates with him. I lie awake at night regretting all the times I had a chance to split his guts, but didn't. Why didn't you? Butch. That was before he started working for the boss. But now he's number 3 on the Angels records. First Whalen, then Schultz, and then the Stool. You hear that, Stool? Jim. Yes, I hear you, Butch. He rolls and lights a cigarette. Butch. That's good. I'm glad you do. Jim. I know you're glad. Joe. What's he say? Butch. He says he knows I'm glad. Joe. He ought to know. Wonder he don't go stir bugs too. Nobody have nothing to do with him but Ollie. Butch. He'll blow out his top sometime if I don't get him first. You hear that, Stool? I said you'll blow your top sometime like Sailor Jack. I'm looking forward to it. Joe, what's he say? Butch. Nothing. He's smoking in there. Joe. You ought to tip him off. Butch. No, I never ratted on nobody. Not even that Stool. Queen. Allison. Hey, Jim. What does +4 mean? Jim. Who's got +4? Queen. I have. What does it mean, Jim? Jim. It means your physical condition is 4 points above perfect. Queen. Relieved. These bastards had me worried. Butch, climbing on a stool by the window. Foghorns. It's thick as soup outside. Listen. Joe, what? Butch, excursion steamer. Joe, which one? Butch, the Lorelei. Joe, look at them lights on her, will ya? Red, white, green, yellow. Butch, hear that orchestra? Joe, what are they playing? Butch, Roses of Picardy. Joe, that's an old one. Butch, it come up the year I got sent up. Well, I remember dancing to that piece at the Princess Ballroom with Goldie. She requested that number every time I took her out on the floor. We danced there the night they pinched me. On the way out, right at the turnstile, them 6 bulls met me. 6 of them. That's how many it took. They had the wagon waiting at the curb. Joe, last time it was 4 bulls. You're getting less conservative, Butch. Butch, Roses of Picardy. I'd like to dance that number one more time with Goldie. Joe, maybe it was her that put the finger on you. Butch, nah, not Goldie. I bet that girl's still holding the torch for me. Joe, keep your illusions, Butch, if they're a comfort to you. But I bet if Goldie was still holding all the torches that she's held before and after you got put in the stir, she'd throw more light across the water than a third alarm fire. Queen, where's my manicure set? Butch, I wonder if a guy is any good at 60. Joe, what do you mean? Butch, you know, with women. Joe, I guess it depends on the guy. Butch, I'll still be good. But 20 years is a lot of time to wait. Queen, has anybody seen my manicure set? Butch, you know there's a window in Boss Whalen's office from which a guy could jump right into the bay? Joe, yeah, the quick way out. Butch, I was thinking that it would be a good way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Rub 'em out and jump through that window for the getaway, providing that you could swim. But me, I can't swim a goddamn stroke. I wish that I'd learned how before I come in here. Joe, wouldn't do you no good. Nobody's ever swum it yet. Butch, I'd like to try. They say some people swim instinctive like a duck. Joe, you'd take a chance on that? Butch, no, I'm scared of water. Queen, excitedly, I put it here last night. Butch, did you see it? Butch, what? Queen, my manicure set. Butch, it's gone out with a slop bucket. Queen, what'd you do that for? Butch, it stunk up the place. Smelt like rotten bananas. What's this on Sailor Jack's bunk? Joe, a package of letters from his old lady? Butch, aw. Joe, she said she was coming from Wisconsin to see him in the last one. Queen, all my life I've been persecuted by people because I'm refined. Butch, somebody ought to told her how the sailor is. Joe, well, she'll find out. Queen, because I'm sensitive, I've been persecuted all my life. Butch, yeah, she'll find out. Queen, sometimes I wish I was dead. Oh, Lord, 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 I wish I was dead. Musical theme up. Fade. Blackout. Episode 3. Announcer. The prognosis. A Spot comes up on the warden's office. He's looking at a racing form sheet when Eva Crane, his secretary, enters. Warden, lifting the phone and dialing. Has the track, Bert? Fast? Okay, I want $20 on Windy Blue to show. He hangs up. Anybody outside? Eva. Yes, that woman. Warden, what woman? Eva, the one from Wisconsin. She's still waiting. Warden, I told you Sailor Jack's mother has quietly entered. She carries a neatly wrapped bundle in brown paper. She smiles diffidently at the warden. Mrs. B. I beg your pardon. I took the liberty of coming in. I hope you won't mind. You see, I'm Jack Bristol's mother, and I've been wanting to have a talk with you so long about my boy. Warden. Sit down. I'm pretty short on time. Mrs. B. It won't take much. To begin with, Mr. Whalen, I never felt the jury did exactly right in giving Jack 3 years, but that's done now. I've got to look to the future. Warden. Yes, the future, that's right. Mrs. B. I haven't heard from Jack lately. He'd been writing me once a week till just lately. Warden. Lots of boys get careless about their correspondence. Mrs. B. For 2 years, not a week passed without a letter. Then suddenly, just a month ago, they stopped coming. Naturally, I felt rather anxious. Warden. Jim. Jim. Yes, sir? Warden. Check on a boy named Bristol. Mrs. B. Thank you. I came all the way from Wisconsin. Warden. Long trip, huh? Wisconsin's where they make all that fine cheese. Mrs. B. Yes, we're very proud of our dairy products up there. She looks anxiously after Jim, who has gone slowly to the file case as though stalling for time. Warden. They manufacture the best cheese this side of Switzerland. Yes, sirree. Mrs. B. Jack's last letter was strange. I have it with me. It's not at all like Jack. He wasn't transferred to any other prison, was he? Because he kept complaining all through his letter about how terribly hot it was in a place called Klondike. His penmanship has always been quite irregular, but this was so bad I could scarcely read it at all. I thought possibly he wasn't well when he wrote it. Feverish, you know. He's very subject to colds, especially this time of year. I brought this wool comforter with me for Jack. I know it's not easy, Mr. Whalen, to make exceptions in an institution like this, but in Jack's case, where there are so many considerations, so much that I regret myself when I look back at things, mistakes that I made. Warden. Mistakes. Yes, we all make mistakes. Mrs. B. Such grave mistakes, Mr. Whalen. Our household was not an altogether happy one, you see. Jack's father, well, he was a Methodist minister, and his views naturally differed quite a bit from most young boys'. Warden, with a cynical smile. A preacher's son? Mrs. B. Yes, but there was a disagreement among the congregation not long ago, and my husband was forced to retire. Warden, impatiently. I see. I'm very busy. To Jim. Have you found that card? Jim, stalling. Not yet. Mrs. B. He was so uncompromising, even with poor Jack. So Jack left home. Of course, it was against my wishes, but she opens her bag and produces a sheaf of letters. Oh, those long, marvelous letters that he wrote. If you would only read them, you'd see for yourself what an exceptional boy Jack was. Port Said, Marseille, Cairo, Shanghai, Bombay. Oh, Mother, it's so big, so terribly, terribly big, he kept on writing, as though he'd tried to squeeze it in his heart until the bigness of it made this heart crack open. Look, these envelopes. You see, they're packed so full that he could hardly close them. Pictures of places, too. Elephants in India. They're used like pack horses, he said, for common labor. Little Chinese junkets have square sails. They scoot about like dragonflies on top of the water. The bay at Rangoon. Here's where the sun comes up like thunder, he wrote on the back of this one. Kipling, you know? I wrote him constantly. Jack, there's no advancement in it. A sailor's always a sailor. Get out of it, son. Get into the civil service. He wrote me back. I kept the middle watch last night. You see more stars down here than in the northern water. The Southern Cross is right above me now, but won't be long because our course is changing. I stopped opposing then. I thought that anything he loved as much as that would surely keep him safe. And then he didn't write a while, until this came. I still can't understand it. He mentioned a girl. He said it wasn't his fault. I know that it wasn't. If I could convince you of that. Warden, it's no use, ma'am. You might as well be talking to the moon. He's had his chance. Mrs. B. But in Jack's case... Warden, I know, I've heard all that before. Jim, have you found that card? Jim, coming slowly forward with a card from files. You better look at it yourself. Warden, read it. Read it. We're running a social service bureau? Jim looks uncertainly at Mrs. Bristol, who raises a clenched hand to her breast. Mrs. B. softly. If anything's gone wrong, I'd like to know. Jim, reading huskily. Jack Bristol, larceny. Convicted May 1936. Sentenced 3 years. Looks up. He slacked his work. Spent 3 days in Klondike. Warden, sharply. Is that on the card? Jim. No, but I wanted to explain to this lady what happened. Mrs. B, rising slowly. What happened? Jim. You see, ma'am. Warden, sharply. Read what's on the card, that's all. Jim. Came up before the Lunacy Commission, May 1938. Transferred to the psychopathic ward. Violent. Delusions. Prognosis. Dementia precox. Pause. Mrs. B. That isn't Jack, my boy. Warden. Now see here, he motions to Jim to get her out. I know how you feel about this. I got all the sympathy in the world for you women that come in here, but this is a penal institution and we simply can't be taking time out from our routine business for things like this. Mrs. B. My boy, Jack, my boy. Not what you said. Anything but that. Say he's dead. Say you killed him. But don't tell me that. I know how it wasn't here. He wrote me letters. The food not decent. I tried to send him food. He didn't get it. No, even that you took from him. That place you sent him 3 days. Klondike. I know. You tortured him there. That's what you did. You tortured him until you drove him... She turned slowly to Jim. Crazy. Is that what you said? Oh, my precious Jesus. Oh my God. She breaks down, sobbing wildly. Warden, get that woman out. Jim assists her to the door. Whew. He lights a cigar and picks up the form sheet. Blackout.